If you carry a firearm and discharge your weapon in self-defense, you could face hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expenses. So carry the protection of CCW Safe, Self-Defense Legal Services membership. Upfront payment of all criminal and civil defense costs with no out-of-pocket for members.
And we are back. I'm Chris Evans, CEO of Survival Dispatch, joined tonight by my good friend Randy Nance, combat wounded Green Beret back home in Texas. And below us, Agent 007, Jeff MB, 26-year CIA case officer. Tonight, we're going to be discussing the European collapse and how it's contributing towards 9/11 2.0, both before, during, and after. We have a very, very short sit rep tonight, and Mike Glover is going to join us in maybe 15 or 20 minutes. Then we'll get into the main topic. But before we do that, we've got the conflicted question tonight. Let's get that out of the way first. And for those of you not familiar with it, conflictedthegame.com. These are 14 card games set in post-apocalyptic scenarios. Most questions have, some element of morality to them, hence the name. Conflicted. With modern society crumbling, the government had to prioritize certain resources. Food and water could only be consumed once. After the collapse of modern civilization, do you think the federal government will put the well-being of the people or itself first, and why? So, quick question for you guys. Why does it say food and water could only be consumed once? Any ideas? I'm lost on that.
It's not a recurring asset. Like if you have a car, you can drive it more than once, but you have water, you can only drink it once. If you have food, you can only eat it once.
Right.
Whereas if you have a generator, if you have solar cells, those can last over time.
Right.
Well, I was thinking you're cutting you down to one meal a day, but I don't know. I mean,
the context is kind of screwy.
Yeah.
This is bad. This is really.
It leaves a lot for open interpretation.
So we'll do our best to answer it at the end of the broadcast. If y'all leave your answers in the live chat or the comment section down below, we'd appreciate it. So before we get into the very first one, I want to give a shout out to one of our SDM members. I'll just give you his first name is Will, and he's a commercial airline pilot. And he's been feeding me a fair bit of information as far as SOPs and those sort of things in the airline industry, commercial airline industry. So he sent to me a note after I mentioned the man pads being used on airplanes at low altitudes. And I just want to share a couple comments that he made quickly. So he says, you're correct. The airplane flies fine with one engine. The most critical point for an engine failure is while still on the runway, but just over V1. So takeoff decision speed. As we get away from the ground, the margin for error increases. On the opposite side is close to the ground when landing. That isn't hard to recover from because the airplane is lighter and has momentum. The flip side of that is a legitimate engine failure is very uncommon at that point as the engines are operating at a lower power setting. Therefore, the startle factor is huge. All of that said, to get to this, many approaches are near buildings that offer a location to attack. The most widely known of these is, and I'm not going to go into all the details, but San Diego. So I'm assuming both of you have flown into San Diego at some point. The landing pattern kills me, right? You fly right through downtown San Diego. You can literally reach out and touch the skyscrapers, but there's no other landing pattern that can come into that. You nodded your head, Jeff. I mean, is that not the tightest landing approach you've ever seen? It is for me.
Actually, I've never flown into there, but it's similar to others. If you look at Midway, not O'Hare necessarily, it's in town. If you look at San Antonio's airport, it's right in the middle of town. The old airport in Denver was really right in the middle of town. It's not used now because they got the new airport. If you look at LaGuardia, right right in the middle of town. There's a lot of the older cities have airports that are just right in town. They weren't in town when they were built, but the town moved out to them. I mean, DFW's got a lot of stuff around it. When they first built that thing,
Yeah,
man, you needed shots and a visa to get out there. It was literally the middle of nowhere. It was just farmland.
it was. I don't know about your audio, Jeff, but it sounds like you're, I don't know, like in
Oh, here, let me.
really hollow. That's
Is that better?
yeah, much better.
Yeah, my mic was too far away.
Yeah, okay, no problem. Randy, have you flown into San Diego by chance?
No, I haven't, but in LaGuardia and a couple others he mentioned, you know what I mean? And or any of them that it seems like there's buildings right there. You know, and honestly, several in Florida. Florida's not much better because well, they don't have enough room for parking in Florida. So
True
that
story.
thing, you know.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that he mentioned San Diego right off the bat, because San Diego always blows me away. I mean, you can look out the windows on either side and you're flying between the skyscrapers.
That does seem crazy.
It is, and it never changed after 9/11 1.0, just because of all you've got, obviously the Navy and a whole bunch of other things going on there, and you got mountains on one side. It's the only approach, I guess, that works for it. But interesting, you mentioned it. Also interesting, though, that he said it's when the planes are fixing to take off at flight speed or just get up, that when the engines get taken out with a man pad, which is a shoulder-mounted heat-seeking missile, it's a small one. It's only 1.5 pounds. That's interesting. You made some good comments as far as it coming down. You still got momentum, which makes sense as well. So anyway, with that being said, check this next one out. I've only have 3 articles for the sit rep before Mike Glover joins us. This is a sick, man. So let me scroll up so you can see. So Stealth Medical, she says, we are not the same. At an Iraqi army graduation, female soldiers showcased their endurance and some very useful skills by eating live snakes and pigeons in front of their families. 23 seconds. Well, I mean, if that's not, marriage material, I don't know what is. Come to you first, Jeff.
2 observations. 1, they should have had Ozzy Osbourne playing in the background.
Yeah.
Not that stuff. And 2, this is what happens when you cut off people's SNAP benefits.
So it just Pensrel asked a legit question, and I've had like a crazy busy day, and I'm just kind of rewinding the video right now. He asked if it was AI. It could possibly be AI, but I don't see any diffusion or occlusion, which are the telltale signs. That doesn't mean it's not. And it could very well be AI, but it's just a crazy freaking video, whether it's AI or not. Randy, your thoughts? I mean, you fought in Iraq. Can you see people over there doing things like that, or is it all?
Well, I saw a level of evilness, honestly, in that area. Those people, certainly the bad ones, and that, took me by surprise even. We've got some pretty rough cities, always have. New York City, the bigger cities, always have had some rougher crime, but boy, but I was like, that was very intense. I guess, now that we got them over here, don't let them next to your pets. I'm not sure what the what the warning is there. But
don't we have people who pride themselves on being snake eaters over here?
Yeah, but I don't know that we ever look like that. I'm not sure raw either. We probably cooked it. So
yeah, for sure. We would have 2 game fests a year back home in Texas, and everybody would bring whatever they caught. And a lot of times you'd see like a fishing net, like the wire ones, full of rattlesnakes and stuff. You go up and jingle your tees, and they freak out. We'd eat them. Amongst everything else. That's Randy can tell you. Well, Jeff lived there as well. That's where it's not uncommon at a game fest for everybody to roll in with a 5th wheel smoker. Like everything.
Well, and I think snake eater term, as far as Green Berets, it's supposed to still be alive, right? I mean, I don't know if that snake was alive. It didn't look aggressive, but they were also eating pigeons. So I wasn't sure what the actual,
Yeah. I don't know either, but you know what? I will check on it before the broadcast ends. I just didn't have time, but it could very well be AI.
Interesting video either way.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we'll get back to you on that one. All right, next one up. The Afghan DC shooter was radicalized by the Pakistani Deobandi group, Tablighi Jamaat, at a mosque in Washington State, according to sources close to his family. He had an exemplary service record and never supported jihad until he came to the U.S. The problem is domestic, according to this particular person. I don't know. I wouldn't call this domestic myself. I mean, Jeff, I'll go to you first. Just because he was radicalized here doesn't mean it's domestic in terms of, that's a very un-American thing.
No, but the point is he wasn't, if they're trying to say he wasn't radicalized overseas and then came here, but came here and got radicalized. But we've seen that a lot. A lot of these homegrown jihadis, especially the ones that are 16, 17, 18 years old, they were normal kids, and then they got caught up and they got basically groomed on the internet, hooked up with some radical Islamists and then convinced to go build a bomb. Now, the build a bomb part's usually from the FBI suckering them in, but there's a lot of these guys that were maybe raised Christian and then became disaffected and, went to jail, became Muslim in jail, and then became jihadis.
So quick question for you, since you were in Afghanistan. Somebody said that vetting these Afghanis to work with us in Afghanistan versus vetting them to admit them to our country, two radically different things. But the Biden admin said, well, they've been vetted already, let them in. Just want to hear your thoughts on that as far as the difference between, obviously, it's not right.
Well, it's very difficult to vet them because there's no record system per se over there. A lot of times what you would do is you would have Afghanis you worked with, and then you would try and collect the cream off of that group. And then, you would train them, and while you're training them, you're vetting them, and you might polygraph them, but polygraphing people from the Middle East is hit or miss at best. But
why do you say that?
Is what the aspects in a person you're looking for them to be on a counter-terrorist pursuit team or an anti-Islamist military unit is not the same as the guy you want dating your daughter.
Right. So just curious, why did you say polygraphs are hit or miss over there? Are they professional?
Polygraphs work on Western people because of guilt. We feel bad about doing something because we know it's wrong, or we're taught that it's wrong. In the Middle East and in Arab culture and Middle Eastern cultures, theirs is a shame-based society. Okay. They don't care that they did something wrong. They don't want you to know about it. So that's the shame, is people look down on them for what they have done. They're not mad that they did it. They're mad that they're embarrassed that people know about it. If you're of a guilt-based society like we are, if you cheat on your wife and you never get caught, you still feel bad about it because you know it's wrong to cheat on your wife. Over there, if you cheat on your wife and you don't get caught, score. Nobody knows. There's no blood, no foul.
Gotcha. So just quickly, this is not exhaustive by any stretch of the imagination. So I ran that URL by Grok because X by default blocks a bunch of the other AIs for obvious reasons. It's not owned by Elon. But this is saying the video was not AI generated, but that's not exhaustive. If you look at the videos that I evaluated last night and this morning that purportedly showed Hamza bin Laden be alive, and I debunked both of them as AI, and then it came out they were created by Kling AI. You can see a lot of things in AI videos that I couldn't see in this one either. But the only way to do this, folks, you can't drop a video on something like AIornot.com and say, is this AI generated? It might come back and say, oh, it's 50% chance, 60%, whatever the number is. But if you prompt an AI like Grok, ChatGPT, Claude, or whatever, and say, analyze this video frame by frame and specifically look for occlusion and diffusion, those are the giveaways, right? So occlusion would be, I hold my hand up like this, but my shoulder is still showing through this part of my hand here. Diffusion would be like somebody took a a big eraser and blurred the crap out of things, especially lines and whatnot. The one with Hamza bin Laden was easy. There were no pores in his skin. There were no individual hairs in his face. When you went frame by frame, his eyes would move from here to here on his head. It was clearly AI generated, but that's interesting on this one here. So anyway, Mike Glover has joined us. He's backstage, and good timing because I want to go into a thing with Tulsi Gabbard. So let's get Mike in here first. Mr. Glover, how are you tonight?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Living the dream, one
Good.
nightmare at a time.
Yeah, Mike.
Hi, guys.
So before we get into the main topic, Mike, which is European collapse, we've just got this one article left with Tulsi, and of course you're friends with Tulsi Gabbard, and I'm interested to hear what you have to say here. The Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, confirms that Operation Mockingbird remains alive and well inside the Central Intelligence Agency, and that she is now moving to obliterate it once and for all. I'm not going to read the rest of this because it's a fairly long video. I'm going to play the whole video, then I'm coming to you, Mike, first, then Jeff, then Randy for your thoughts. But for those who don't know, Operation Mockingbird is the CIA basically telling the legacy media, whether it be dead tree format or digital or video, what they should be broadcasting. It's basically propaganda. So here we go.
The media being used as a propaganda mechanism, we saw it flatly. I mean, I think it's the smoking gun, quite frankly, of the Obamagate narrative and the Russiagate narrative, that it was so baked in that the New York Times and Washington Post went and ran with it. Some would say that that's part of Operation Mockingbird. Some would say that that's part of what we learned in the Church Committee, that the intel agencies were using media outlets as their mouthpieces, and that those mouthpieces would parrot the official narrative. And I wanted to ask you, is this operation still going on? Are you aware of the intel agencies working directly with media outlets in order to push prescribed narratives that may or may not be true?
It's something that we've already had to deal with, Benny, within this administration, where there are people within the intelligence community who believe that their will is more important than the will of the American people, and will weaponize intelligence by leaking it to their friends within the mainstream media with the intent of undermining President Trump's agenda. It is not one that he hasn't already talked about in every rally and town hall that he did throughout the campaign. I don't even know how many there were, but President Trump is enacting the very thing he promised the American people he would do in this election. So people in the intelligence community, they may agree, they may disagree. That's not the point here. As intelligence professionals, as people who work in the national security space, in the intelligence community, they are required to fulfill their mandate to their oath to the Constitution of the United States, and to the President of the United States, who is duly elected by the American people. Those who leak intelligence to their friends in the mainstream media with the intent of undermining the president who was elected by the American people. None of these intelligence professionals were. They are subverting the will of the people and therefore undermining the Constitution.
It's wild that you're still having to deal with that. Call it what you will, but Operation Mockingbird, just incredible that they were just out with it, that they were using the media as government organs to push propaganda. And
I'm going to go ahead and stop it there. So, Mike, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because obviously this all came about after the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act that Obama tacked on to the annual defense budget. I think it was 2012 or so. But, I mean, you've worked with the CIA. Your thoughts on Operation Mockingbird?
Yeah, well, I'm pretty familiar with it, not internal as an employee of the CIA, but the understanding of it, you know, in the 70s, and I think it dates back as early as the 50s, but there's a lot of issues with it. One, they were recruiting and infiltrating these journalists to report on things that they wanted to shape the intelligence narrative. And that is not new to information operations campaigns. That is like 101, right? If you want to influence the masses in some way, you have to shape the narrative. If you want to shape the narrative, you have to have access and placement to do so. I think what's more concerning is what I've also appreciated about the CIA is likely why things like this still exist. When you're in the military, everything's done 2 or 3 years at a time. That's just how the nature of time and positions work. Whether it's your OER or your NCOER rated time, you're a team sergeant for 2 years, you're an officer for 2 years, you got a command for 3, you ETS every 4. Like, you have a temporary tenure in your position. And whether good, bad, or indifferent, how you want to measure that, it keeps things moving. It also makes it painful that everybody who comes in wants to reinvent the wheel. Well, the CIA is the opposite of that. The CIA actually promotes internal relationships. Like, they facilitate it, they allow it. They want that, because what's better than, a case officer, man and woman, being downrange and married together, because they'll never want to leave. So they're locked in their positions. And then you have obviously career intelligence officers who stay in those positions for a long time, working their way around their directorate or their group or organization within the CIA. And so I think a lot of it is likely legacy type deals. That's my suspicion. And then loyalty to programs over loyalty to the Constitution, like Tulsi Gabbard said. Look, I've actually seen some of this in behavior from case officers that were very young, very junior, but wanted to make an impact, where they would do likely anything to make sure that they were, getting the right cables in the right position, to make it look like they were doing a superior job so they could get bumped above their peers. And so that's scary, the way the institution works, where things are compartmentalized. There's a potential chance that there's an operation that, Tulsi Gabbard isn't even allowed to access because she doesn't have a need to know. I mean, there are some deep-seated covert action and operations where, especially politicians, because they're on a temporary timeline, they're not going to be privy. And I don't know how it works legally or doctrinally, but it kind of makes sense. If you're a politician and you're an elected official and you come in for a temporary period of time and you have an operation that's been ongoing for decades, are you going to compromise that program? And how deep is it buried to where what you're getting in the briefing, it doesn't even come close? So it's glossed over. So there are major concerns. And man, I think just like some guys did in the cabinet, where they just went to the basement and started digging around and they discovered stuff, you might want to have to go in the basement and start talking to people or digging through stuff to uncover things like this.
Mike, that's a perfect handoff for Jeff. Jeff, I'd love to hear you pick that ball up and run with it.
Well, yeah. First, these are called people who do this. They call them agents of influence. And they're just that. They're agents, and they might be a news reporter, and they say, "Look, write an editorial that is on our side of this issue, or makes the Russians look bad," or something like that. And we've been doing that since 1948 in the Italian elections of 1948, because we were countering the Russians, who were doing the exact same thing. We do it, the British do it, the Israelis do it, the Chinese do it. Everybody does it and has done it forever. Now, after the Church Committee in the 70s, where they uncovered all the dirty tricks from the 50s and 60s, we had what was called Executive Order 12333, which limited severely what CIA could do in the United States, and specifically with reporters. When I was in, we weren't even allowed to talk to a reporter. If a reporter came up and volunteered really good information, I could not take it, because there were prohibitions dealing with reporters, dealing with clergy. There's other weird things like, I think it was like, there were some like Fulbright scholars we were not allowed to talk to. It was just some weird stuff. But with Obama came in, he kind of rolled some of that stuff back. And the problem is, when you roll it back for stuff overseas, what you're really doing is you're rolling it back for stuff domestically, because especially today, you get an article, you place an article in Le Monde in Paris. Well, then it gets picked up by the Times of London. It gets picked up by this newspaper over here and this news thing over here. Before you know, it's all the way around the world. You can't do that anymore and guarantee it's only going to stay in the country for which it was intended. And that's the problem. And a lot of these guys, I really think, don't even try. And Mike is right. You have guys that are very cutthroat, that they will do whatever it takes to get promoted. And if your boss is promoting a program like this, and he's your boss, and he may have a big say in whether or not you get promoted, well, then you're probably going to do whatever that boss tells you to do.
All right. Appreciate that, Jeff. So Randy, do me a favor, put on your tinfoil hat and speculate on how much bullshit the CIA has fed the American people, how much propaganda influencing Americans in general.
How much time did you say we had? No, seriously. I was sitting there thinking as they both were speaking about that, because, I have no experience. I couldn't tell you any what they just laid out right there. But I thought to you, it's the same old system. When President Washington, I think, left office, right, when at the party or whatever it was, the gathering, the ceremony at the last time when he left office for good, I think that's when it was, right? He gave a little speech and basically said, what I fear is the worst thing could happen is a two-party system where people are more loyal to the party than they are the nation. And here we are exactly with that right now. We have two parties that are more loyal to the party than they are to the nation. And the CIA, and I'm sure all federal agencies, aren't any different. And you have to, I mean, it makes sense, right? If you're going to run intelligence, you trust and credibility, there's a lot to that, right? And it means a lot. So, and then, basically, the system would protect itself is what I'm trying to get at. You know what I mean? So the system's going to hire and promote folks that buy into that. So our problem is now that what they've just described is that there are many of the old timers are now bought into the system so much they're more loyal to the agency than they are to anything else. And I mean anything else.
Yeah, I appreciate your comments there. So we're going to jump into the main topic of the night, and that is the European collapse. So just quickly, this is episode 65, 66 out of 144 episodes that Clede and I wrote, called the Long War series. And it's all predicated on happening post 9/11 2.0. So every episode I give just a quick recap. So for those people who haven't seen previous episodes, as long as you understand what 9/11 2.0 is, you will understand everything else for the balance of the podcast. Basically, you don't have to watch every episode. You don't have to watch them in order, and you'll still get something out of each one. So the intelligence for 9/11 2.0 is that 10 to 15 American cities will be hit simultaneously. Each of those cities will have 10 to 15 sleeper cells. Each sleeper cell will have somewhere between 4 and 12 individuals in it. There will be a command and control center in Afghanistan, just like there has been for Mumbai in 2008. That was CCTA, a complex coordinated terrorist attack, and Paris in 2015. So the command and control, their job is when the first wave of attacks happens in these cities, and they're at soft targets, so schools, shopping centers, those sort of things, they're monitoring the news and they're monitoring social media and giving the sleeper cells instructions on what to do to maximize the damage. So, for example, the primary attack, the first attack on, let's say, a school, it's not over when you think it's over. So people have this thing called normalcy bias, where the brain wants to get things back to normal as fast as possible. So the school's been hit, you survived, everybody's like, phew, thank God. The first responders show up, and the first wave of them are not first responders. They're jihadis dressed up like first responders, so that people will come running towards them and they'll be slaughtered. And this is standard MO. It happened 10/7 in Israel. It's happened many other times. But when the real first responders show up, the bad guys will let off VBIEDs, vehicle-borne IEDs, and with the goal of killing as many first responders as they can. So the secondary and tertiary attacks, worse than the initial attacks, okay? So while all of this is going on, and those sleeper cells are all working towards one goal, which is to overtake the tier 1 trauma center, which does a bunch of things. Number one, it gives them a base to operate from to broadcast horrific videos, maiming, torturing, killing Americans. It also has a high psychological effect, but it also prevents the people who are injured from being able to get immediate care, which means people who are injured are going to be triaged. And these tier 2 cities, population 100,000 to 500,000, don't have major centers around them to offer mutual aid. So it's a pretty devious plot on their part. So as those guys, those sleeper cells, which are typically ISIS sleeper cells, but there are other jihadis that have teamed up with them, the airline component starts to happen. So domestically, you will end up with Al Qaeda going through security at TSA, wearing these invisible suicide vests that are made out of plastic and fluids. The only way to detect them is a millimeter wave scanner. We only have them in 3% of our airports. There's a very specific reason they'll go through security with them, because they will hijack the planes on the ground. They have people working in all of these airports who will help them. They'll help them push the plane away, et cetera, et cetera. And then when they fly the plane, they'll go to low altitude over the city. They will detonate their vests, and human body parts, luggage, plane parts, et cetera, will terrorize the heck out of everybody. There is a second component of jihadis getting on planes in Europe and blowing them up with their suicide vests when they get over American cities as well. So with that being said, tonight's topic again is essentially the European collapse. So Europe in general, is quickly unraveling right now. They've got energy crises. They've got worse migration invasion than we've had. They've had more terrorism happen to them in recent years than we have by a long shot. There's a lot of destabilization of these NATO allies, and that directly affects our security. So with that being said, and setting the stage for that, imagine you've got energy nightmares turn into power outages, turns into economic freefall. And Europe is ditching the cheap Russian gas for things like windmills, solar panels. They barely work. We know that these are not good long-term solutions. And they already have factories that have been shut down, families freezing in the dark right now, as far as this winter is concerned. And it's turned what used to be the world's powerhouse into, I don't know what you would call them, like beggars, that they're begging for liquid natural gas, basically. But they've been taking hook, line, and sinker on the climate change stuff, right? So we've had blackouts rolling across Germany, France. You've got leaders over there admitting that their green, dreams, I don't know what else you would call them, are essentially bankrupting the middle class. You've got small businesses folding up. And a lot of that's because of the energy prices. Energy prices have tripled. I'm going to show you the price of gas over there versus here, and it is something else. So at the end of the day, add in all the additional taxes that they pay, Europe is being hurt tremendously, and that in turn is weakening their will to stand up against threats. And that in turn means that their militaries are cash strapped, amongst other infrastructure, MI5, MI6 included. And so their military's cutting training, their law enforcement's cutting training, their military stockpiles are dwindling. I mean, these guys have put themselves in an extremely vulnerable position. So with that being said, I'm coming to you, Mike, and I'd like to hear your opinion on how bad do you think Europe's energy blackouts could potentially get by the coming spring 2026? And what does that mean for Europeans in general, in your opinion? You're on mute, Mike.
I think it's a major problem, obviously. I mean, looking at the statistics of how many immigrants have basically taken over Europe, it's shocking to say the least. I mean, an average of 4 million per year. And if you see what's going on in the pockets of resistance where immigrants there are not being basically confronted legally at all, they're not enforcing any laws against them, but they're putting European, you could name the country, Europeans in prison for speaking their mind. It speaks to obviously a larger cultural issue. Will they be prepared for something as bad as a complete blackout? Likely not. They could be cut off from the world very quickly. They're not as resourceful and as resilient. And I think the Ukraine-Russia debacle is a good indication of that. So I think it's really bad. It gets really bad because when you have a whole bunch of people who come from the third world that are used to operating, living, existing with minimal resources, they'll figure it out. Who won't is all the Europeans that are there right now who have no generators, who don't even think about this because they live in utopia in their head and in their, their silo, in their own utopia in their own country. That's going to fall apart, and losing power, they become very vulnerable. That population does, from all the third world players that have infiltrated their country.
Well, that's an interesting comment, Mike, as far as them being used to living without some of these amenities. I hadn't thought of it in those terms. Good point. So, Jeff, I'm curious, in what ways is this energy chaos in Europe already making terrorists bolder? I mean, knowing that cops, troops, everything is stretched thin. They know it. We know it. Everybody knows it. You're on mute, Jeff.
It's on multiple fronts, actually, because it's one, there is the energy aspect of it. You can have blackouts, and when blackouts happen, we all know crime goes crazy. When blackouts happen, the surveillance state that the Brits depend on so much to try and maintain order collapses as well. All those cameras need electricity. But the longer term thing is it weakens their economy to such a degree that they don't have the resources to apply to problems, be it jihadi problems, be it crime problems, be it economic problems. They no longer produce steel. They don't build things really anymore. They are now almost 100% a service economy because they will not allow the energy production that is required for smelting steel and for shipbuilding and, and having automobile factories and things like that. They're sitting on a ton of coal, but they don't produce coal. They were sitting on a ton of oil, but they don't really produce much oil anymore. It's less. They have gas fields all over the country that are discovered that are large, but they won't develop them because of their stupid green policies. And that affects the economy. And when you have unemployed large swaths of your economy, you think about the unskilled labor or the people like that are unemployed, you get unrest. And the jihadis, just like the socialists and all that, that's their recruiting ground. When you have disaffected people, then they're more likely to be receptive to an extremist viewpoint, be it on the far left or the Islamic.
Great answer. So let me get us on the other stage here, and we'll get Mike up here as well. And Randy, coming to you next. In your opinion, is there anything that could be done, a simple step to save Europe, or are they going to be so resistant to anything that's fossil fuel related that they're just going to spiral further downward? You're on mute, Randy.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, that's not just fossil fuels. I mean, they don't ever, as far as I'm concerned, Europe has never had any good ideas, right? And they haven't made, I mean, just look at, they're through as you mentioned, they're full climate change, you name it, and putting in stuff that clearly doesn't work. And so, I think there's no saving Europe at this point because they don't want to be saved. And not your common folk. I'm sure that's the case. But, just look at everything the way it is right now. I think it's a serious problem. And I think it may be past the point of no return, because the people that are in charge would be the ones that would have to start turning that tide. And I don't see that happening.
Well, I was going to move into segment 2, but you just set Mike Glover up for perfect question, something we haven't discussed with him on Survival Dispatch News. Mike, you got Pakistan's a nuclear power, but they don't have intercontinental ballistic missiles. They have old fission-style warheads. The French have the Triad. They can launch thermonuclear warheads, air, land, and sea around the world. The British, we sold them our Trident missiles. They have 8 nuclear subs that can deliver thermonuclear warheads everywhere in the world. Do we not have to go in and save Europe at some point to prevent those weapons from getting into jihadi hands, under jihadi control?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be our obligation. I mean, via the partners, we do have some good partners there. I mean, the relationships seem like they're falling apart in a lot of ways, but there are some solid relationships there. I think we've navigated some economic obstacles with some of the countries that were hardliners until Trump came in. So yeah, we do have allies. I think we work with our allies and we block out everybody who's not invested, but it's going to be a global pursuit of jihadists anyway. I mean, look, I've been briefed at command when I was a master sergeant and a sergeant major on the foreign jihadist threat to Europe several times, and it's scary that how many jihadists are there that we don't know exactly where they are. We don't have them geolocated. We don't have no signal intelligence. We just know their last known whereabouts, and so it's an ongoing problem. And especially if this thing kicks off, you better believe there's many targets of opportunity that we would be seeking. And maybe not even working with their foreign service and intelligence organizations to make sure we're doing it the right way. We just might have some global pursuit parameters or open parameters to be able to go after them and kill and capture them where they are. So I see that happening. Their guys on the ground in those countries, special operations elements, which don't do a lot, but they do a lot of domestic surveillance, targeting. The SAS is a great example of that. The German KSK is another example of that. Those guys are going to be super active on the ground, and I think the relationships between them and our counterterrorism units will kick off some going after bad guys for sure.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. And before I go into the second segment, I just want to quickly answer this point here. So Jason Belter, good point. I worry more about the AQ invisible vest coming here from overseas than AQ passing security here, and even hijacking a plane won't need to as they land from overseas origins. There's a very specific reason that I said that they will go through TSA security with those vests, but I didn't close the loop on. So I appreciate you bringing this up, Jason. When planes start exploding, and the investigations are done afterwards, and we realize that they skated through TSA with their vests, and we realize they skated through European security, the airline industry is effectively done. It will be shut down for months, if not years, until they figure out how to catch these things in every single airport. And that was Osama bin Laden's primary goal. The primary goal wasn't to terrorize Americans. That was a secondary goal. The primary goal was to shut our airline industry down and completely screw our country up in the process. So with that being said, let's get into segment number 2. And then Mike, I'm coming right back to you. Same order, Mike, Jeff, Randy. So segment number 2 is the flood of migrants. And man, we had our southern border blown wide open for 4 years. It's been blowing out a heck of a lot longer than that in Europe. You know, you've had all these boatloads of people coming in from Africa, Middle East. They've absolutely swamped places like Italy, United Kingdom. I mean, you've got 1 million crossed this year already into the UK, completely unchecked, that weren't even like registered. In other words, they're there completely unknown as far as who they are, no vetting, no identities, nothing. And you now have these towns in Italy, especially, but all of Europe, and especially in England and France, by the way, now that have these no-go zones. And I remember when Trump said no-go zones in Europe or France, whatever it was, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, whatever it was, everybody's like, well, he's racist. There's no such thing, blah, 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 blah. And of course, we have seen that absolutely skyrocket and explode. And you've got schools that are overflowed with kids who don't speak English or French or whatever the native tongue is. I had one Uber driver in Nashville 2 weeks ago when I was there to shoot that TV show. And the guy says to me, he was probably, if I had to guess, maybe 70 years old. He said that his daughter was a principal at a middle school in Nashville proper, and that 88% of her students were from the Middle East and didn't speak a lick of English. And I said, oh, must be working pretty hard to teach them how to speak English. He said, no, there's so many of them, they gave up on it. They just translate everything. They're not teaching them any English. And 100% of their parents, by the way, don't speak any English whatsoever. And that's Nashville of all frickin' places. So at the end of the day, we've had these weak border patrols and policies across the Western world. We've got do-gooder policies. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but it basically means that the bad guys can slip through the cracks at the end of the day. And so you've got thefts, assaults, murders, rapes that the cops can't keep up with, number one. Number two, you've got cops in Great Britain. Well, you have the system in Great Britain. Last year, they took 3,000 hardened criminals and released them early to make room for 3,000 people who posted something on social media that hurt somebody's feelings. That's not bullshit. Go check it out. It's unfreaking believable. So at the end of the day, the system is radically breaking down there, even more so than here. Welfare systems are overloaded. Billions of dollars that should have gone to things like fixing infrastructure, roads, etc., having more police, etc., didn't happen. And at the end of the day, this unchecked wave, it's not stopping in Europe shores. It's still coming into Canada like nuts. It's coming into Australia, New Zealand like nuts. I mean, Kanakistan to the north of us. It's funny, Jeff mentioned the whole thing as far as steel was concerned. The clown who's running Canada, what's his name? Something Kearney. He was at a press conference yesterday, and he said, well, we don't need steel in Canada anymore. So it doesn't matter that the steel industry is gone. I'm listening to him going, what the heck? But anyway, just craziness. So at the end of the day, this open border stuff has been happening across the globe, especially Western nations, and nobody knows who all's been let in and just how bad things are. So I'm going to cut over to you here, Mike, and let you kick this thing off. So I'm curious what your thoughts are, Mike. Why are these European governments letting boatloads, literally boatloads, of military-aged men to come in and claim that they're refugees seeking asylum, but there's either none or very little women and children? Is this not like a conscious effort to commit self-genocide, or do you think they're just dumbasses?
I just think they're dumbasses. I mean, they're not that smart. I mean, let's be honest. Like, if this was a deliberate campaign to destroy your country and they were just following through with their plan, they would screw that up. The reality is that they're just incompetent and they think they're on the right side of history. I just saw an interview recently with Chris Williams. I was on his podcast before, and he's a great guy. He was on Rogan's podcast, and he was talking about how the UK specifically has always kind of screwed this up and then come back and apologize like every 10, 20 years on behalf of the government because they screwed things up. And they continue to screw things up, and they're on the wrong side of history, and it's really easy to see. But in their world, from their optics, from their perspective, they think they're doing everything right. It's only when you take a clip of an audio from a dude wearing a wig still, who's a judge sentencing somebody to 20 months in prison for talking poorly about somebody who was offended, that you realize, oh my God, this is exactly why America was created, because we saw this happening in real time, and this is happening in these chambers with dudes with wigs, and they think they're doing the right thing. All these immigrants that come from, especially Syria and Afghanistan, that flooded into the EU, have completely destroyed that place. I mean, I've talked to people who have gone on recent vacations, and they're just like, yeah, that it's a huge problem. You know who doesn't have that problem? The Asians. You know, you don't see that problem in Japan. I hear it's happening a little bit in South Korea, but you typically don't see it there. Nobody calls the Japanese racist for like locking their country down. I mean, as an American, I couldn't even get into an establishment because they're like, "Are you Japanese?" I'm like, "I'm Korean and Japanese," and they're like, "Sorry, you can't come in here if you're not a citizen, if you're not a local." Like, oh, I feel offended because I feel like that's racist. But good for you for standing up for your country.
What kind of business was that, Mike?
It was it might have been a massage parlor, so I don't know. No, it was a restaurant. It was a restaurant in Japan, and it was just we were getting some food, and they were like locking down the front door, and they wouldn't let us in. I was like, okay, fine, yeah, I get it. You know, at least you have quality control at your front door of your establishment. The liberal world will call that racist or discriminatory. They call it nationalism. They're just protecting their country. Lastly, one of the points is vetting. You know, like I did a piece last week on My Force podcast about vetting and how we vet people. The DHS website lines out the vetting process, and it includes biometrics. It includes a supposed interview. It includes running your biometrics and some of your information through a database. Well, guess what? If you're a jihadist and you got your fight on and you never got rolled up, you're not in a database. So if you show up as a middle-aged male, you might be actually one of the elite ones because you didn't get rolled up. And then you come through there and they think vetting is, in my opinion, an initial process. When I went in the CIA, I had a polygraph. I had a background investigation. When I was in Delta, I had a 1 week long in West Virginia psychological evaluation.
Wow.
That they took all the information and used it against me in a board. I have a TSCI, which does a robust background investigation on you, multiple interviews, and then you have to do checks and balances every single year. And that's me as an American who was born in this country and obviously is a patriot for this nation. So you take a potential terrorist and your vetting process is doing their fingerprints and asking them a few questions. It's like, yeah, you're good to go. Nothing to see here. Move on. Well, that's a huge problem. It's a problem here, and of course, it's a problem abroad.
Man, that was very well said. Just a couple quick comments before I go to Jeff. Number one, I've never heard of a restaurant that has $5 happy endings, but it's good to know. And the other thing here on Survival Dispatch News, we have decided that the word patriot is cliche. So we now refer to what are typically patriots as real Americans. TM Randy Nance. Randy, he trademarked it. So that's where that comes from. So Jeff, really simple question for you, and I'd like you to stitch it together. How linked is the migrant surges in Europe tied to crime rates in Europe, which have absolutely skyrocketed?
Oh, they're one-to-one. They're definitely linked. If you look at, when's the last time you heard of a...
Okay, I have to cut you off there. That's very racist.
Yes, it is. When was the last time you heard of a grooming gang or a rape gang in Britain prior to, say, I don't know, 10 years ago, 20 years ago?
Never.
You never did. And if you go to Paris, I've been to Paris fairly recently. I went there to visit my son when he lived in Switzerland, and we went through Paris. Huge swaths of the country look like North Africa. I mean, of the city, look like North Africa.
Wow.
They have so many freaking Algerians and stuff there. You know, I was shocked that anyone still spoke French, except they speak French in Algeria. They are everywhere. And it is... and those are the areas that have the high crime, the areas where you cannot go. Those are the no-goes. And then you look at Sweden. Sweden used to be one of the safest countries in the world, one of the safest countries in Europe. And now it's a damn combat zone because they let in like 1 million, Afghans and Palestinians and Syrians. And so it now has one of the highest violent crime rates in Europe. Sweden. I mean, that's like saying, North Dakota is now the hellhole of America. It's like, it's not. It's just insane. But it's all because of immigration.
Yeah, that is insane. Absolutely. So, Randy, coming to you next here. If Europe slammed the borders shut like Hungary did, do you think they could turn this around relatively quickly, or in your opinion, is the damage just too deep?
Well, I take our, our example, and, we've had some enforcement, but I would think in close to a year's time, we would have got more people out. And certainly when we heard Khalid talk about how Pakistan in a short period of time got millions of folks out, and then we can go back into our own history to several other presidents, even back into probably the 40s, but where they got a relatively, a million or two people out quickly, and we're not doing it. So I don't think that if Europe, closed the doors now, I think if they did and they got serious about deporting all these folks, but then that would undo everything they've already done, because I think it's a demonic thing. I think they're, those people are probably in the satanic occult or something, because nothing else makes sense about anything that they do.
It doesn't, Randy? So quickly want to thank Ripple Effect for the tip. Thank you very much. Always appreciate your support. Seriously, it's very much appreciated. So we're going to jump into segment number 3, but actually I'm just looking at my notes over here. Somebody was asking about Khalid. So for those of you who don't know, Khalid's, one of his safe houses was breached by the TTP, and he was stabbed in the process in the lower right side of his abdomen. And then it got infected. And it's only been the past couple of days that his doctors have been allowing him to sit upright. It's in a brutal spot. It's just above the groin on the right-hand side. It was a pretty deep stab wound as well. So the infection's gone. He's on the mend. But from somebody who's I blew my abdominal wall out and had surgery. That stuff down in that area takes a long, long time to heal. So with that being said, let's jump into segment number 3, which is titled Terrorism Taking Hold, Bad Guys Running Wild. So you've got jihadi, outfits like Hamas digging in deep across Germany and Sweden this year. They're using mosques, online chats to recruit locals, plot hits, raids, busting cells that they've had raids, where they've busted these cells that have had bombs ready to go off that they wanted to hit crowded locations with. Europe has taken like this hands-off approach to the hate preachers that are jihadis, not the hate preachers as they call like Tommy Robinson, which is bullshit. Tommy Robinson is just he's a patriotic dude, and he's trying to save his country, culture, and Christian values. Those guys get smoked. The bad guys who say we're going to come and kill you, Christians have to bow before us, blah, blah, blah. They're not having anything done to them whatsoever. There's also been a rash, by the way, of fake charities in Europe, even worse than what we've had, where there's been this massive influx of dark money from guys like George Soros that are essentially funding this invasion. There's no other way to describe it other than an invasion. And, you've got anybody who says anything that doesn't toe the line, they're getting death threats. Some of us are very familiar with that. You've got parts of Paris now that they have knife attacks on a daily basis. They barely ever make the news now because it's such a commonplace thing, which I can't even get my head wrapped around that. We just had one in New York City, I think it was last week, where a guy, one of these invaders, hijacked a car with a machete, and the driver, he's running away and stops, and you can't hear what he says, but he says something back to this jihadi guy. He starts chasing him down the street with like a 2.5 foot, machete. It's just mind-boggling that this is happening in our country. But at the end of the day, you've got the cops over there focusing on the wrong things. You've got the chief of the Metro UK police threatening that he is going to extradite Americans who reveal any information on crimes committed in Great Britain by minorities because it's racist. That's a true story. Go look it up. We played it on Survival Dispatch News last year, and a whole bunch of people on our panel and the audience were like, yeah, go ahead and try that. But anyway, moving on from that. So at the end of the day, they've got so many foot soldiers inside of Europe, just like we do here, I don't know that a mass deportation would actually fix Europe or not. And I don't know that it would get all of the terrorists out of that. But coming to you, Mike, very, very specific question for you. What is driving the uptick this year for 2025 in terrorist attacks in Europe? I mean, there's been a noticeable spike in jihadi activity across Europe.
Well, I mean, like terrorism is not new. Counterterrorism, or the idea of counterterrorism, is modeled as a reaction to the action of terrorism. Counterterrorism and the units that have been created, that have stood up in the 70s and 80s, were all because of all the terrorism that was going on throughout the world and this jihadist push. What's going on is a lot of these guys have been off the radar. Our focus and our energy has been elsewhere. I mean, we forget, the entire GWAT is marred by controversy politically, but we forget about what came out of that, like ISIS, like the propaganda and the videos that everybody was watching. I watched in intel briefs before it was even named ISIS and knew that this was going to be significant. That has never gone away. That ideology has only festered and grown and lied dormant for the right time and place to attack. So I think it's just an indication of what exists and has always existed. I mean, again, we talked before about the Crusades. This is not new. There's just more opportunities now. They'll get more brazen. You know, I don't like, you know, you talk about the potential worst case scenarios, and one of the course of actions is getting the suicide vest and getting it through TSA. Or you can get your CDL and drive a semi truck through a crowded parade. I mean, and make it real easy. So terrorism isn't hard to do. It's going to happen. Again, like the shooter in New York and against these National Guardsmen in Washington, D.C. He used a .357 revolver, Smith & Wesson, and he shot both of these guys in the back of the head. Why? Because they weren't paying attention. They didn't know he was there. Because again, terrorism, insurgents are offensive. They could do it any time and place of their choosing. So we are on always on a reactive timeline to all of this, and it's going to continue. And guess what? It won't ever stop. This will be something that will exist in my lifetime, in my son's lifetime, and his son's lifetime. It's just something you can't stop out with kill or capture raids.
Let me ask you one more question before I go to Jeff next, Mike. So Khalid has spoken at length on the timeline for 9/11 2.0 being preceded by a phase in Europe of increased activity amongst the jihadis in Europe. So the way he laid it out is, he said, you know, the brain trust of the jihadis, the Islamic Army in Afghanistan, they come up with a tactic or a plan. They test it in Pakistan, being a third world country, you know, not having robust infrastructure like we do. And then they take it from there and go to Europe to take it to the next level. And then they're going to take it from Europe to here. Is that potentially part of all of this, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, it could be tied to a broader campaign, but also these guys could be completely decentralized. Like we talked about before, it could just be date and time, right? They have a date and a time, and they know the objective: as many casualties as possible, chaos, and so you could see indications of things popping off that are triggers for other jihadists in other countries to pop off. It's like, okay, they were successful. That's phase one. Now it's our turn. Phase two in X country. So it could be an indicator. I mean, it's something I pay attention to, which is, you know, who are these guys getting rolled up? Like they just had a kid rolled up, I believe today or yesterday, that had body armor and was planning on an attack. And he's got like a real crappy beard. He looks like he's from Uzbekistan or something. He could be an American citizen, but all those indications, those behavioral indications and those patterns I'm looking at, because I'm like, okay, is this an uptick? And is this going to be the kickoff point? If something happens overseas, I would be very I would be very careful as Americans to just write that off as like sucks to be them, because that's typically our mentality. Well, it could suck to be you, because that could be, again, part one or phase one of a broader operation. I completely buy into that.
Yeah, and I didn't, just to be clear, it's not that I doubted Khalid. I just wanted to get your perspective, your angle on it. So Jeff, coming to you, how come all of a sudden recently the German law enforcement agencies are finding Hamas terror cells? You know,
because they're looking for them.
So they weren't looking for them previously, essentially?
Probably not. It was politically incorrect to pick on those poor, nasty, those poor, downtrodden Palestinians. Yeah, in the Germans, it's so funny. They're sensitive to calls about anti-Semitism because of what they did in World War II to the Jews. But at the same time, they don't want to be too chummy with the Palestinians and Hamas and Hezbollah, because that just reinforces hey, aren't you guys who killed all the Jews? It's no wonder you're palling around with the guys who want to kill all the Jews. So I think they're just sensitive to that criticism, and so they're reacting to it. The Palestinians have not traditionally targeted the Germans. But if you look at Black September and the attack on the Israeli Olympic team, well, that was in Munich. That was in Germany. They used Germany as a theater, as a staging ground. They weren't after the Germans per se, but the Germans were, let's just say, a little lackadaisical on things.
Yeah. It makes sense. So Randy looks like he got booted off, just came back. Welcome back, Randy. So a very specific question for you, Randy. How big, and you can keep this to Europe or America, how big is the online component as far as radicalizing lone wolves is concerned? Is that like the biggest challenge we're facing?
Well, as you know, I'm not on a task force that's looking into that, but I would suspect we've seen more of it, right? And I would say that that makes it, and as Khalid has said, and Jeff has said, and probably Mike at some point, they've got this down to a science, and it's very easy now, even online, to radicalize someone, certainly when they're, in a vulnerable position, we'll say. And so I just think that's, one, it helps, drive that narrative, you know what I mean? That this is organic, that it's coming around naturally, or that people are just doing this, but people are being radicalized. And you think about, how big being online now, you think of now, even in your average home, internet has become more important than cable TV. If you don't have your internet, you don't have anything. And then people spend a lot of time on it. You have a lot of chat rooms. And apparently even over Discord with all these gaming folks, and all the youth that are playing video games and on Discord, apparently it's very easy. So why wouldn't they do it?
Yeah, fair enough. So I see Mike got bounced off, came back. Good timing, Mike, because we've completed 3 of 5 segments. We only have 2 more to go. I got to ask you, Mike, straight up, tell me the truth. How good is the Wasatch Wagyu jerky? I mean, this is friggin' insane stuff.
I'm already out of my supply, so I'm going to need a resupply. It's bad.
It's like, I'm trying to find, here's one right here. What do you think of that one, the dill pickle?
That's my favorite one. I CBD gummies and that do not go well.
And hey, listen, wasatchwagyu.com. This is the best jerky, I swear to God, I've ever had. We don't get affiliate income from them. They're friends of Mike's. But you can use discount code SD15 and get 15% off. Mike, I got to tell you something funny. I said this to the audience, I think last night. So I don't think Jeff and Randy have heard this either. This shows up on Monday, right? And Cindy's like, oh, it looks like they restocked you for jerky. I said, yeah, they did. And I grabbed it, put it around my arm like this. And she says, you have to share that. I'm like, yeah, probably not. And she said, that's not a meal, that's supposed to be a snack. So yesterday, guess what I had for lunch, Mike? I made a dill pickle jerky mustard sandwich on bread. It was freaking outstanding. And so when she got home, I said, you're wrong. It was a great meal. was awesome. And step away from the wash wagon. Jerky. The stuff.
I actually had one of his. I bought a steer, a Wagyu steer from him.
No shit.
A really horrible idea. I'll never do that again. I thought it was just going to be a cow. It was a steer, and he jumped my fence and destroyed my kid's playground. That was quite the adventure. But we winded up butchering him, and we winded up processing him. And man, the Wagyu, I mean, Wagyu is just obviously completely different than anything else. It's just high quality fat and marbling in the meat, which is what makes it really good. And man, it was supposed to take us a year to eat him. It took us 6 months. Every meal we were crushing some of that Wasatch Wagyu.
That's unreal. Yeah, I'm glad you turned me on to their jerky though. It's just unbelievably good. So anyway, with that being said, we're going to go into segment number 4 now, which is NATO essentially, cracking under pressure. You've got Russia is buzzing the edges of NATO with jets, even drones. Believe there were a couple missiles landed in Poland 6 months ago ish, something like that. They've been dropping arms treaties that they've had with Europe for many, many years. And I think that it's safe to say that the big shots in America are starting to panic. They're starting to sweat. They've got all kinds of money issues. They've got all kinds of problems with the cost of fuel. When fuel goes up, everything goes up with it. And, it's funny how I think it was Kamala Harris said, Donald Trump can't control inflation. There's nothing the president can do. Bullshit, there is. If you crank up production of oil and create more supply, then it goes down. It's simple economics. Supply goes up, demand, whether it stays up or not, price goes down, and it's reflected in everything that has to be, shipped across the country. But everything now is costing more in Europe. And on top of that, to operate their equipment, whether it's be tanks, planes, whatever the case may be, they're basically skimping on all that stuff as far as the militaries in Europe are concerned. And you've got some NATO partners, not many, a few like Estonia and Poland, are screaming for help after multiple close calls. And I don't know how else to describe the alliance. Then they're starting to look like a paper tiger. And if we weren't there, or if we weren't potentially there to prop this thing up, and I think they'd be screwed. And of course, they never thank us for that at all. They think it's our obligation or something like that. But at the end of the day, things are kind of wobbly in Europe as far as NATO is concerned. And, you've got all of these allies more concerned about insulting people, hurting people's feelings online, transgender this, transgender that, everything that just is complete bullshit, the green scam, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I personally think that Europe is a sinking ship. And if we don't liberate them at some point in time, I think that they're in super deep trouble. So coming back to you, Mike, just because, you and Randy are both combat vets, so I know you'll have some good insight on this one. How close, in your opinion, do you think we are to Russia testing NATO for real? More than just doing flybys with jets, but actually testing NATO.
We're probably closer than we've ever been in human history. They're so weak. It's like they're trying to commit hiri-kiri, like they're trying to kill themselves off. And if you're Russia and you're a proud regime, country, dictator, whatever, you look at that and you're like, wow, how weak are these people? They can't even police their own countries up. So it's a major issue. And I think, the fragility that's being evolved in that entire region is only making them more exploitable. And if there's a time and place in history to do it, it's now.
Yeah, well, that's a perfect setup for Jeff next. Jeff, I'm wondering, in your opinion, why is Europe skimping so much on defense budgets when, the Russian bear is literally at their doorstep? Is it just because they're too broke from the green nonsense?
Well, yeah, their economy is weak, a lot weaker than ours, and probably weaker than Russia's. Most of it stems from their energy policy, where they're basically trying to run a modern economy with wind and solar, which is a joke. They had a lot of nuclear. They've shut it down, which is stupid. And you need energy to have a viable economy. And if you look at their manufacturing base is going away. Their steel production is down. They had they built a big, I think Rheinmetall built this big plant that was supposed to use hydrogen. They've basically given up on that after spending billions of dollars on it. And they've pledged 5% of their economy for defense. Trump said, you got to pull your weight. And they said, okay, we'll do the 5%. They can't afford to do the 5%. One, they have a shrinking population. They're worse than we are as far as that goes. And so you don't get the soldiers. And they're even talking about reinstituting the draft in Germany to kind of to fill the ranks. But they don't have the will. They don't have the money. Now, is Russia going to test them? They could, and I suspect if they do, it's going to be in the Baltics, the Balkan states, because they're smaller and they're isolated, and there's a Russian minority there that they think they might count on. They're not going to invade Poland, to be honest, because I think Poland could kick their ass. They don't have enough troops to take Ukraine. They're not going to start another war with Poland, who has 700,000 troops, and it would also, spur war with NATO. And the Poles are willing to fight, and they've got a good army, and they've got good armor and things like that. So if they do anything, I think it'll be in the Baltic states. They'll try and cleave one off, and then claim it's to free the ethnic Russian peoples in that country. But Europe won't do shit because they can't.
That's becoming, clearer and clearer. So, Randy, in your opinion, I want to know what you think about NATO. Is it still worth us investing in, or is it just time to rethink the whole thing? Like, I'm not saying we abandon ship, but is it time to rejig the whole thing? Because it doesn't seem to be working.
Well, I don't think it has been for decades, and we've been paying for all of it.
Agreed.
I don't like them. I think we should probably can it. It's a fact that they also helped with the NGOs and all this immigration coming into our country, and probably all the other ones as well. So I'm in a firm belief that they've been a waste of our money for quite some time. I'm sure it was a novel concept when it was brought up, but it's something that just hasn't worked out the way it was intended. And I think it's just more of a sideshow.
I don't disagree. Just a quick question for you. What would you say if I told you that gas is 4 times the price in some European countries compared to us?
Well, ours has finally come down some, but we haven't been that cheap. But I think it's always been that way, though, right? To my understanding, we've always had a lot, and certainly here in Texas, we've had cheaper gas than certainly any European countries by far.
I don't, Mike or Jeff, can you address that as far as historical differences in fuel prices here versus there? Jeff, you're on mute if you want.
Yeah, no, we're pretty low now. I mean, if you adjust for inflation, we're pretty low now. It's not 69 cents a gallon, but then again, bread doesn't cost a nickel either. And you're not making $2 an hour minimum wage. So it's all relative to how much money you make and everything else. But if you look at the price of gas is so dependent on the price of oil. The cost of refining is relatively even and pretty much the same as it has been for quite some time. So the thing that really drives the price of gasoline is taxes, California, and the price of crude oil. And if you look, crude oil right now, last time I looked, I think it's around 60 something a barrel. It's not the $23, $24 a barrel it was, back in the 80s. But then again, we're not, the dollar isn't worth what it was in the 80s. And this is another thing, when the dollar is weak, commodity prices go up because everything's priced in dollars.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's it for the 4th segment. We're going to pivot into the 5th and final segment, which is essentially we're in the shadows of 9/11 2.0. We've got complex coordinated terror strikes heading our way. You've got sleeper cells in Europe. Khalid has spoken at great length on this, and they're gearing up to essentially hit them with their equivalent of 9/11, not 1.0, but 2.0, multi-city hits there. And I don't know near as much about it. I don't know very much about it at all compared to Khalid. He's the one who's been kind of running that show. But when he's back, maybe he'll expand on it. Maybe Jeff or Mike or Randy might have some input on that tonight. But at the end of the day, Khalid's timeline that he laid out, the jihadis, the Islamic Army, which is all of our enemies, have joined together now under that banner. They attack Pakistan, they attack Europe, then they attack us. Well, that also includes large-scale stuff like 9/11 2.0. I've seen some people posit that Europe could potentially get hit on the same day that we do. I don't have anything solid to that effect. It's just, been mentioned. But I'm safe to bet that Europe will be hit sometime around the same time as us, most likely before us. That's Khalid's timeline. And, there's a lot of unproven, unsubstantiated intel coming out of Europe that kind of indicates they're going to get hit earlier in the attack window, sometime in December probably, and us after that. But at the end of the day, we had the old Biden administration throwing our southern border open for 4 years. We have tens of millions of people who came into the country completely unvetted. We know that at least 200,000 SIAs were released. That's from J.J. Carroll, former 24-year CBP special agent, which, by the way, JJ, diehard American, same age as I am, 56 years old, same age as Randy and me. He starts on Monday with ICE at a position 3 levels below where he left the CBP a couple years ago. And he's doing it for one reason and one reason only, because he wants to help the country. So God bless JJ. I spoke to him today, and I'd be lying if I told you I wasn't concerned for him based on the shit that we've seen happening, to our ICE officers. But at the end of the day, we have embedded threats in the country, whether they're sleeper cells that are going to participate in 9/11 2.0, whether they have truck bombs that's their role, suicide truck bomber, taking our power grid down. I mean, cyber attacks against the power grid, that's a concern from Volt Typhoon and other CCP hacking groups, Salt Typhoon, etc. But it's just as easy to walk up to substations. When you see the buckets, they're full of mineral oil to cool the transformers. You don't even need armor-piercing rounds to poke holes in them. Just regular 223, 556 will do the trick. And when that mineral oil drains out, they overheat and poof, there goes that substation. Small transformers, it depends on who you want to believe, but they're many months out. Large transformers, they're called the LPTs, are upwards of 60 months out to get them replaced. So the large power transformers is basically what they're called. So Mike hit the nail on the head when he said, you got 9/11 2.0, but then you will have follow-on attacks, the balance of our lives, our kids' lives, our grandkids' lives. I mean, this shit's just starting to get warmed up. And at this point in time, we're trying to get the word out as best as we can, all of us. And it's funny because the mission for Survival Dispatch, since I acquired the company several years ago, is our job is to dispatch information so fellow Americans and friends of America can survive these very dangerous times. And if you take nothing else away from our podcast, just remember the one thing: if you're unfortunate enough to be anywhere near the X when things kick off, but you're fortunate enough to survive, get as far away as fast as you can. Do not run to first responders. Just get as far away as you can, because the secondary and the tertiary attacks are going to be much worse than the initial attack. And you do not want to be anywhere near that stuff when it happens. So at the end of the day, I think Christopher Wray said it, and I can't stand that guy, but we've got red lights blinking all over the place. And anybody out there who says to you, oh, you're just like a doom scroller, we're not going to get hit. Okay, so tens of millions of people came into the country because the Biden admin, the illegitimate and illegally installed Biden admin, opened the southern border, flooded our country with tens of millions of people, many of whom hate our guts. And if you think we aren't going to pay a heavy price for that, like I said, Jeff and I, we've got some land for you, some oceanfront property in Arizona that you might be interested in. But if somebody questions you, ask them that. Say, okay, well, tens of millions of people here hate our guts. You think nothing's going to happen? Anyway, with that being said, I'm coming to you, Mike, on this one. What is the absolute scariest aspect of any terrorist attack intel that you've heard of that could potentially hit Europe or us or both of us? Like, what's the thing that makes you the most disconcerted?
Look, I think I've heard a lot of chatter, and I've gotten briefed a lot. I think it's a multi-pronged attack. I mean, like, we have never seen that really in American history on a large scale. I mean, let me just give you a case in point. The North Hollywood shooting, right? That took place, that had two, I believe they were brothers, but two guys who were hopped up. I believe they were on PCP. There's meth and PCP in their system, at least. One had an AK variant, and one had an SKS. They were kitted up, hopped up on drugs, and they were getting their gun on. That changed the course of history for law enforcement in the country in one single moment in time. That was literally something that I've seen 100 times downrange, and those dudes wouldn't last a second. But the fact that the law enforcement officers were under-equipped, underarmed, didn't have the skill sets, and likely never thought this would exist as a threat. I mean, they were going to gun stores and taking AR-15s off the shelf when California had AR-15s on the shelf, and were using them to respond. They took and acquired a armored vehicle to go to recover law enforcement officers. They had 17 law enforcement officers that were injured. Luckily, none of them died, but it rewrote history and doctrine for law enforcement in this country. That is nothing compared to jihadists who are trained in a deliberate campaign and attack to include clacking off a device, plans to kill people who are bugging out or bugging in during that attack, and then doing it on a massive scale. Like, you don't have to make this a complex attack. It's not aircraft flying into buildings anymore. It's just dudes with guns. We're just not equipped for something like that. And again, I can get creative here, and I've heard some really radical things, but just the bad guy with the motivation to do harm is scary enough, because again, we are not Barney Fife down the road at your local sheriff's department, who has the tattoos and the beard, who's never been to combat, who makes fun of veterans. Like, that dude is not prepared for war. He personifies that he is, but he's not. And it only takes one dude with the motivation. Imagine a whole bunch of bad guys with the motivation. Again, it would be very bad. It'd be a very bad day in history for the country.
Before I go to Jeff, I'd like you to just weigh in on something. We've got, some law enforcement spouses in our Guardians chat. We also have lots of active duty law enforcement guys. And one of the wives made a legitimate comment. She said something to the effect that, her husband's agency had been trained better, than what the public was giving them credit for. I can't swear to the veracity of that, but I don't think she was lying. But my response was, if you look at pretty much any type of incident where law enforcement is called to, and everybody comes, they pile all of their cars up in one location, and that's exactly what the jihadis want to take them out, right? They all pile up at the scene of the crime. Now they're sitting ducks. Is there any way that we can get agencies, Mike, law enforcement agencies, to realize that they are putting themselves in extreme harm and not to do that with what's on the horizon?
No. And the going back to the lady who made the comment, she's not lying, but she has no context for what she's talking about. Like, number one, I've trained law enforcement for 20 years. Like, I trained law enforcement when I was on active duty. We've had guys all the time plucked to do things, to train with SWAT teams, JTTF, all the things, right? Law enforcement, even the largest so-called prepared organizations in this country, are not trained. I mean, I was the first one to go into CHP, the California Highway Patrol, and teach them shoot, move, and communicate, because they didn't have a concept for that. I was the one who was advocating for putting an optic on your duty rifle that was rotated by shift, not by personnel. So you didn't go in on shift and get your rifle. You got a shift rifle that was zeroed by somebody else and handed it off to the next dude. And there was no optics. And most of this was came about because an officer on a bike, a patrol officer on a bike, was shot and killed by a guy with an AR-15 from distance. And so it's like you're waiting for the worst case scenario to happen in order to change, to write your book, to do the speaking engagements, and to change policy. Well, a GWAT vet or guys who have experience in combat against these jihadists understand the risk to force, and you could just take lessons learned from us and just apply a little bit. I mean, I've actually taught New Jersey State Patrol and their SWAT team, and during the training, they had to segregate me and say, hey, look, there's certain things that you can't train, that you can't even talk about. I said, look, I'm not trying to train rules of engagement or legalities on target. I'm trying to give these guys the worst case scenario. When I was post-certified in California, they brought me in to teach suicide attacks. And people were shocked because they're like, you're letting a Green Beret teach you about suicide attacks on law enforcement? And they're like, yeah, because it could happen. Oh, and guess what? A little while later, it did happen. It happened in San Bernardino. And some of the officers that I trained came to me or sent me pictures and a summary of what happened. And it could happen in your own backyard. So is law enforcement prepared? The answer is no. Are there, look, there are evolving institutions, especially sheriff's departments that have creative sheriffs, like Sheriff Mark Lamb, who's a good friend of mine, who has implemented some of these things and who has gone above and beyond. But these cities that are ran by Democrats and they are regulating what the chiefs or what the sheriffs can do, they're not doing anything.
Man, that's not the right answer, Mike.
Yeah.
So, and obviously, Jeff and I are both friends with Mark too. He's an awesome dude. I just saw him at Mar-a-Lago 3 weeks and 1 day ago. He was the MC, actually. He's a phenomenal speaker. You guys know that, but anybody who hasn't seen Sheriff Mark Lamb speak, he has a presence, let me tell you. Mike, I got to come back to you before I go to Jeff and Randy for the next thing, because you tweaked me on something else. GWAT vets have more experience with going toe-to-toe with these jihadis. You guys have been there. You've been in the thick of things. You've had guys shot and killed beside you. There's a lot of GWAT vets that want to help with this. Let's assume that an incident kicks off and there are GWAT vets in the area. They've got their kit with them. Most of us carry that shit with us all the time anyway. How do they identify themselves to law enforcement so law enforcement doesn't think, who the heck are these guys? How do you, if you just, for example, if it kicked off and you were close by, I know you're not the guy who's going to stand by and let it happen, but how do you identify yourself to the cops?
Well, it really depends. One, I would try not to identify myself at all. I'd try to be incognito. I mean, the idea of you even going up to a law enforcement officer during an event and saying, hey, I'm a certified GWAT vet. Right. Here's my DD-214. Do you got an AR-15 in your car? It's just not going to happen. I mean, Dan Bilzerian during the Vegas shooting is a prime example of what happens when you're a so-called GWAT vet and you have so-called skill sets. And he went up to that officer and the officer was mushed him. It's get the hell out of my way, which is the right answer. As a GWAT vet in special operations, here, let me just say this, because my mindset has changed on this. One, I'm not going to get involved unless it's endangering my family. If I am deploying because I heard something going on and I grab my AR and start going to work and I'm like, I got to save the day, my family is in harm's way. Guess what's changed for Mike Glover over the last 5-10 years since I had kids? The priority for me, number one, is my family. So I don't care what's going on down the road. They can handle that. If I deploy and leave my family's vulnerable, I'm the last line of defense for my family. I will be protecting them. So when it comes to if you want to get involved, if you have the skill set, go to work and handle what you have to handle and do your best to mitigate the risk by calling dispatch, letting them know and communicating who you are, what you look like, all the information, and then beg for forgiveness later. Like if you're that guy, be that guy. But if you're not that guy and you got the tattoos and the beard, and you think you're that guy, don't risk your life or the lives of others because you think you're that guy. Like they're I will tell you this, because if you go into a VA, you'll get a sense of this. In a veteran affairs, if you've been given a disability rating, which a lot of veterans have, only a very small percentage of the veteran community have been in direct line combat. And the idea that every veteran, especially in the GWAT, is a capable warfighter, no. Trust me, no. I remember, flying on the little birds in M860s, looking between my legs and seeing all the clean dressed guys coming out of the chow hall with their containers, looking between my legs with my M4 going, oh, there's two different roles here, right? So like they're only a very small percentage of guys who can get this done, and they know exactly what to do. Everybody else, look, not to say that they didn't serve, they did, but they likely don't have the skill set to do like a hostage rescue, for example.
I've actually got two more questions, but I just wanted to thank Don't Bug Me for the $10 tip. Thank you very much. That's very generous of you. Thank you. And he made a comment, might come to Huntington Beach, California. Our 7 council members are all MAGA. One is a SEAL. I fear my cops and firemen getting killed when this kicks off. I can introduce you to the mayor. So Huntington Beach, California, Mike. So quick question for you. I heard on the weekend, and not that I disbelieve the people who said this at all, but I'm told that if you're a veteran and you have a cannabis card in any particular state, that as soon as the VA finds out, they mark your record as being cannabis dependent. Is that the way it goes down?
So I've heard that too, and I believe it. I mean, it's why I won't get mine. Like CBD, despite it being hemp derived, has traces of THC in it. I own a CBD company. And so 100%, you won't see me get a medical card for Utah, because they'll flag you when they pull you over. They'll report you to every federal agency whenever you're doing anything, including background checks. I would for sure avoid that at all costs.
Okay, to appreciate that. And also, Mike, we've got a bunch of new followers, Survival Dispatch News. Appreciate all of the new people joining us. And I'm going to ask you a question, just because they probably have never heard me ask you this before, but what are your thoughts if like a GWAT vet moved in next to somebody and pulled out a rangefinder to find out how far the neighbors are away? What do you think of that tactic?
Well, a GWAT special operations vet would never do it overtly. They would do it from an urban hide, maybe even a loophole. I'd be in the bathroom range finding through my living room through a window in the dark. So,
okay, watch this, y'all. How far away is your neighbor's house from yours?
If it was 573, I'd be surprised in meters. I mean, I'd be surprised.
Oh my God, that kills me. So Jeff, you're up next, and I've got a question for you, and I'm asking you to speculate, but from all of the intel that you've heard, all the stuff from Khalid and other sources, which cities do you think are the most vulnerable at risk, and why?
Well, it's going to sound political, but it kind of is. I would say a blue city. First of all, most cities are blue cities, but some are bluer than others, because now New York, they've dealt with it before, so they have experience. To Washington, D.C., you've got federal backup right there, so that's not going to be a big issue. So, it's probably not as vulnerable. But if you pick, you pick a city, like a Buffalo, like a Minneapolis, I see them as being kind of an easier target. And as it gets wintertime, you may actually target someone in a little bit warmer area, because it may, in the snow-covered icy roads, it may be hard for the police to get where they want to go. It's also going to be hard for you to get where you want to go.
True story.
No one likes fighting in bad weather. So I think if, you're going to find a city that's, kind of a medium-sized city that's got, blue leadership, which is kind of anti-police and certainly anti-prepared, not prepared for something like this. Those are the ones that could be the most, the ones in the most trouble.
Good answer. Good answer. So, Randy, last question goes to you, and we'll wrap this thing up here. And I know we've covered this before, but again, not joking. We do have a lot of new people on board. I'd like to hear your advice on what steps everyday regular folks can do to spot and even potentially report jihadis, sleeper cells, people who are working in that capacity in our country. You're on mute. There you go.
Yeah. Well, I would say, you know what I mean? First of all, most people would have to get off their phone. You know, they have to pay attention when they're out. You look in the public when you're driving around or out anywhere now these days, everybody's stuck on their phone. So I'd say pay attention would be the number one thing, you know. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. But you just look for abnormal behavior. I mean, you know, you realize we've talked about some of these are going to look more average or more Americanized, probably no different than what the pictures we were shown of the September 11th, the 19, right? They looked fairly normal. They were of a certain descent, but, you know, they didn't look like some crazed jihadi. You know, they have some, like Mike said earlier, they have some crazy beard like I do right now. But they will be of a certain descent, most likely, you know, and, you know, from what we're talking about, I mean, really, some of it is already when they report, you know, on the active shooters or the fake ones or the fake bomb calls. But, you know, I would say just being around, if you see something that looks odd, you know, a group of men doing something that seems odd or it feels odd or you feel weird about it, I don't know that it means reportable, but maybe if you watched for a little bit, maybe it should be. You know, it's kind of a hard question to answer, certainly since no one's really paying attention. And the fact is, these guys are going to kind of blend in. And I have no doubt, you know, the biggest thing is most of it's already done. That is probably the truth. But yeah, thank you, Dusam. I'm getting professional to deal with this weekend. So it's the last week we have to look at this. You know, but most of it's already done. And when this thing kicks off, it's going to be the same old tactic that you use that is always successful, right? Violence of action and speed, and certainly the element of surprise before that first initial kickoff.
So just a comment and a question for you, Randy. What do you think the prospects are, and anybody else can answer this as well, of these jihadis shaving off their beards so they don't look like jihadis?
I think they said they were going to do that, right? Isn't that what they said? They were recruiting people and then certainly having them look less jihadi, like dress like an American, dress, you know, have the same haircut and hairstyle. Heck, this last guy, although looking at him, you could tell he just had the look, right?
Yeah.
But he didn't have an extremely long beard. He didn't look radicalized. He could pass for any normal other, you know, Arabic descent person in this country.
Well, I'll pose it to Mike. Mike, your thoughts on them, you know, shaving their beards and trying to obfuscate their appearance?
I think that's going to be what they're going to do. I think I have heard that before as well.
Okay.
And I've seen it. I mean, I've seen it on Target. Like they want to blend in to the environment. They'll shave it all and be wearing an American flag ball cap. They might even, I mean, I would go as far as like they might just look like an American. They might even have tattoos. They might have the cool guy beard with the Punisher skull in the back of their pickup truck window. It might just be a perfect blend because, look, again, if the goal and objective is to blend into the environment, they are immersed in the culture. They're going to look just like me and you. I mean, when I grow a raggedy tag beard, I look like a jihadist.
I was going to say Ming, more like Ming from, you know. But serious question, Mike. We'll wrap up the segment on this. Give our audience an example or some examples of clothing that would be out of place to hide weapons and other things that people should be on the lookout for.
Not just clothing. I would say, like, look, a trained jihadist might be shopping at REI, and then he might be using a 40-liter Patagonia pack with all the guns broken down in it. So this idea that he's going to be wearing a trench coat, smuggling in weapons, that's not what it's going to look like. I mean, even in my time in the GWAT, I was going against bad guys that were sophisticated, that were wearing hiking boots, that had watches that were sunk to each other. And it's like you thought you would never see that on the battlefield. Well, that's not a new tactic. I mean, again, guys that, MACV saw guys were facing in Vietnam had some indicators that they were just squared away dudes just on the wrong side of history. And so don't think like this dude's going to be in man jams dressed up with a suicide vest, clacking himself off. He might be in a Patagonia jacket, shopping at REI, look like a hiker and getting his jihad on. So I would be very careful how we position what that looks like, because it could look like anything.
I think Khalid mentioned, the puffer jackets that are, for cold temperatures. He said that those are really good at disguising stuff. This is one thing.
The NFL, I think Randy might remember when we got issued the NFL gray long jackets. We used to tether them to MH60s and use them to stay warm in the winter. But right before we landed, we'd throw them off. But they're just basically trench coats. Those starter type jackets, even a jacket like this, like a Patagonia puffer jacket, is a great way to conceal everything. Or like the dude in New York who just walked up to the building. I mean, he wasn't a jihadist, but he was a disgruntled person who had TBI apparently and was going after the NFL. He just walked up and strode up with an AR-15, holding it by the pistol grip.
Yeah.
You just never know.
And nobody even reacted, which just
but nobody did anything.
He walked by people and they didn't even give him a second look. That just killed me.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's it for the main topic tonight. We just got a couple things left, including the conflicted question. But before we do that, my favorite time of the night, 3, 2, 1. All right, it is time for the Carnival Hero of the Night, and this young lady knocks it out of the freaking ballpark. And I picked her as the hero of the day because the guys on the panel can speak to this. When you speak out against any of these things, the high probability that you will get threats made against you. So let's hear what she's got to say. It's long. It's 1 minute and 47 seconds. It's well worth it.
I'm just going to say it. I don't care if it makes me sound cruel and heartless. I don't care that you want a better life. Sorry, do you know how many people are out there right now with horrifically depressing sob stories, and yet they don't get exemptions from our laws? So why should you? There are American citizens sitting behind bars right now because they broke our law, and I'm sure I could find you some gut-wrenching videos of them being separated from their family, of their children screaming and crying that they don't want their parent taken away from them, and yet they were, because you do the crime, you do the time. And the reasonable expectation when you come into a country illegally is to be deported. If you don't want to be separated from your family, then you should probably make better choices. The same way that if I decided to go out and rob a bank because that money would make my life better, I would still pay the consequences for doing such. So why are you so special? You know who probably wants a better life right now? Jocelyn Nungary's family, a 12-year-old little girl who was brutally raped and then murdered subsequently by an illegal alien. She will not get to live the rest of her life because Joe Biden's administration thought that they didn't have to actually enforce laws that are there in order to help keep Americans safe. I'm sure that they want a better life that they will never get because of the failure of his administration. So you can spare me with this nonsense. We all have a sob story. They're a dime a dozen. Tell it walking, because I don't give a shit. You do not get special privileges. You do not get to sit there taking $16.2 billion per year from taxpayers' dollars where they're sitting there struggling to just make ends meet. I'm sure they want a better life. I'm sure they want their taxpayer dollars to go towards actually helping them. So why should we be giving you special privileges? Make it make sense.
What do y'all think of that? I mean,
Oh, great.
Spot
He
on.
says what everybody should be saying.
one correction. It's not 16 billion. It's 500.
162 billion.
It's 500 billion. That's what the GAO came up with. The number they came up with. It's obscene is what it is. All right. The next one is the reader submitted article of the day, and this goes to Shannon G. She's part of our news team on Survival Dispatch Guardians. I'll explain that in just a second here, but we have a serious problem on our northern border, a serious problem. The country has been flooded with radical jihadis amongst other types of terrorists for the past 15, 20 years. It's unrecognizable. I haven't been there in a while, but it's probably been like 10 years or something. And last time I was there, we were going down the interstate and we stopped like at a rest area that had a restaurant and all that kind of crap. And we were the only white people in the entire building. The rest of them were all Middle Eastern. There was nobody that looked anything like us at all. I didn't even recognize the country, but basically, when 35-year-old Jihad al-Shami terrorized a Manchester synagogue last month on Yom Kippur, pledging allegiance to ISIS, few were shocked by what investigators later found out. So what they uncovered is this guy, he went to this mosque, and extremist rhetoric was commonplace. His father praised 10-7, kill the infidels. And it basically years of indoctrination essentially did this to him. Well, when you look at what's going on in Canada, it mirrors that. I don't know if Jeff or Randy, if you want to add anything, but I'm starting to get pretty concerned about our northern border as well.
Okay. I haven't been there in years. I couldn't tell you what it's like today.
And it's not
good. Well, we all know what their leadership's changed over and everything else they're doing. So, geez, there's no telling really.
Yeah. Isn't that the truth? All right. Conflicted question of the night. With modern society crumbling, the government had to prioritize certain resources. Food and water could only be consumed once. After the collapse of modern civilization, do you think the federal government will put the well-being of the people or itself first? Is this a fucking joke? And I'll come to you first, Jeff.
Well, the big question is, would there even really be a functioning government after the collapse of civilization? I would argue no. But if there were something masquerading as an organized government, governments are made up of people. And when push comes to shove, people take care of themselves and their families first. So if you think that someone from the government is going to take food that could be going to their children and give it to yours, you're high.
So if a government employee showed up,
to take care of itself first.
If a government employee showed up, Jeff, and said, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help," you wouldn't believe them?
No, because I used to be one of those guys. Although I didn't show up on anybody's doorstep and try and steal their shit, but
fair enough. Randy?
Well, that's only because you're out now. You're retired.
I'm still in the closet.
Because that's coming.
I'm not out.
That's coming, Yeah, they're gonna take, it's obvious. Now, that's funny, though, after we talked earlier about the once, is it once a day? But hell, it might be just once, period. You can only eat once and drink water once. You're not going to live long. But the government, as we know, just like we've already heard, and we know Biden signed that into law, that, FEMA will be able to come around to your house. And if you have extra supplies, they're more than authorized to take them off your hands to spread them out to the others. So that's exactly what we're going to see. The government's going to take care of itself. Or at least if there is one, as Jeff mentioned, because this is supposed to be after the apocalypse, right? And there's probably not going to be a structured government left, or they'll still be deep in the ground somewhere. But the system will take care of itself, and it'll push whatever it wants at that point.
True story. We got the comment of the night, by the way. Eddie says, "I'll eat my food once. Federal government can eat it twice."
I like that. That was.
There you go.
You win the internet tonight, buddy.
That is the comment of the night. By the way, I just got a text from Mike. His internet connection's gone down, which is why we lost him. But yeah, great comment, Eddie. Absolutely love it. Fantastic. So just a couple quick reminders. You go to survivaldispatch.news, sign up for our Guardian program. It's $7.99 a month or $74.99 a year. You get 2.5 months for free. We have 6 Signal channels. Why do we use Signal? Because it's not a platform that we can be deplatformed from. It's encrypted. We don't have to worry about censorship. Before somebody sends me hate mail saying that they think Signal has been compromised, I'm a programmer by trade, network engineer, systems engineer. I've studied the Signal GitHub, which is the open source repository, for years. There are no backdoors. The encryption hasn't been cracked. And anything you've ever read that says there was a signal vulnerability was actually a phishing expedition, spelled PH, where people were tricked into giving up their credentials. That has nothing to do with Signal. That's called a PEBCAC problem. Problem exists between keyboard and chair. So Signal is where we have our community built. The main chat's called the Guardians. It gets 12,000 plus messages per week. We have a survival and prepping channel. We have a threat wire channel where we discuss security bulletins and intelligence. We have our SDENS channel, survival dispatch emergency notifications. And the way that works is that if you're a Guardian, you will get emergency notifications to your email. You'll get them to the Signal channel. You'll get them to our website, Substack, survivaldispatch.news. And if you have the POClink radios, they will be sent to your radios as well. By the way, if you have the POClink radios, POClink does all of the support on them. All you have to do is email them and tell them that you are a Survival Dispatch News Guardian. They will get you fixed up and get your radios in the correct group. There's a whole bunch of other cool things that Guardian subscribers get, but the community by far is the biggest thing. I've got some pretty big announcements coming up in December for things that we're going to light up in January that will take things to a whole new level. Other than that, I want to thank our Guardians that are already with us. If it wasn't for you, we couldn't work 16, 17, 18 hours a day, 7 days a week to bring you this news. You can confirm that with my wife, by the way. And I want to thank our premier sponsor, Carnivalt, carnivalt.com. This is 100% American meat. It is mRNA-free, antibiotic-free, histamine-free. The bags are made in the United States. The O2 absorbers are made in the United States. These are our people, real Americans. TM Randy Nance. You can use code EATMEAT, all one word, get 10% off. And here's the deal. This deal is going to stay on all the time. If you go to carnivalt.com and you spend $99 or more and you have signed up as a Survival Dispatch Guardian, I will give you a free month every time that you go and do that. So if you sign up, for example, for a year for $74.99, you go out and you buy some Carnivalt, you email the receipt to support@survivaldispatch.com, the Carnivalt receipt, and I'll tack an extra month on every time you do it. If y'all eat like I do, you'll never have to pay for a Survival Dispatch Guardian membership. And Randy can attest to that as well. This is a really kick-ass product. This bag, 6 ounces of steak, reconstitutes to 1.5 pounds. And your pro tip, by the way, the USDA made them put a thing on there that says it takes an hour or two to reconstitute. It doesn't. It takes 5 to 10 minutes. Put a little bit of salt in the water, bouillon cube, whatever, and it'll reconstitute just like that. I reconstitute this. I throw it in my air fryer for 4 minutes. I got medium rare. Just amazing. And I won't go into all the horror stories of meat being glued together. Go look it up yourself. Go look up the butchers in big name grocery stores taking expired meat that's turned yucky brown and gray and dousing it in fresh red blood and ammonia and sticking it back out on the shelf. And you're buying stuff that is absolutely disgusting, way past its prime. So want to remind you, Khalid is on the mend. Probably the way things are going, maybe next week we'll have Khalid back. But if you miss Khalid, join the Guardians because he's pretty active in there. He's not allowed to sit upright for a very long period of time. My mother's still in the hospital, by the way. I thank all the people who said a prayer for her, as well as Khalid. Thank you very much. Roger, one of our SDN OGs, had surgery yesterday. He's on the mend, waiting to hear back what the results are from what they took out. I don't want to violate his privacy, but want you all to know he's very thankful for those of you who, wished him well and sent him prayers. Other than that, we'll be back tomorrow night at 7 p.m., the usual time, 7 p.m. Eastern, that is. And we're going to be specifically discussing the weaponization of migration. But between now and then, please like, share, comment, subscribe. God bless America. Enjoy
God bless America. And happy birthday, Mama Heaven.
Amen.
When Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem took charge, she found a FEMA that had become a bureaucratic nightmare, plagued by decades of inefficiency and corruption.
The Department of Homeland Security firing 4 FEMA employees after it was revealed they authorized $59 million in payments for luxury hotels in New York City to house migrants.
FEMA was funding the Roosevelt Hotel that serves as a Trinidad base of operations and was used to house Laken Riley's killer.
When Hurricane Helene devastated the Southeast, FEMA's Disaster Relief Fund was unable to provide the necessary relief because millions of dollars had been diverted to housing and transportation for illegal aliens.
But the migrant scandal was just the tip of the iceberg. When Secretary Noem ordered a comprehensive review, she found a culture of rampant waste that treated FEMA like a liberal piggy bank. While families suffered, FEMA spent $3.2 million on DEIA consultants, $1.5 million on effectiveness training, and $65 million to outsource their own work.
We're up against decades of gross mismanagement and negligence.
The review even found 24 IT employees who spent nearly $500 million on cybersecurity, yet delivered virtually nothing.
We had to fire a bunch of FEMA employees for being on porn sites at work, on their government computers, many times a day. So instead of doing disaster claims, they were looking at pornography.
Those days are over. Noem has implemented a new rule. She personally approves every grant over $100,000 to ensure it goes to Americans, not bureaucrats.
There's a lot of fraud and waste and abuse.
Thanks to the leadership of President Trump and Secretary Noem, the message is clear. It is no longer open season on the American taxpayer. DHS is draining the swamp to build a FEMA that finally puts Americans first.